to start again?
Whenever you're ready.
All right. So now we're going back to the SARGON case, because SARGON on December 20 has published a video on his channel, The Tinkery, called Learn to Spot a Confidence Trickster. The title is a wink at the way you title your own videos, Coach Red Pill, where you try to teach a kind of life lesson. And he, in this video, he spends 40 minutes partly addressing some of your legitimate critiques, but also going down to a behavior which I call doxing, which is, it doesn't matter to me if you do the research or if you use the products of the research that others have been doing. If you go into the past of someone to smear them, to smear their person, you are committing acts of doxing, especially if that person had chosen to go by a pseudonym on the internet. So I would say there are lots of critique of me saying, well, Jeff, it's not doxing because Coach Red Pill has appeared publicly on TV appearances. So to be clear, I don't think that showing the old videos of Coach Red Pill on TV appearances is doxing. But linking his name and linking his these false allegations to him, that's what is doxing to me. So, Coach, did you take issue with the fact that some of your past TV appearances were being shown?
Well, to tell you the truth, first of all, I don't quite see how they're relevant. But before getting into that, in the first minute of that video, SARGON anywhere. He claimed that I'd already doxed myself. That is not true. Now, I will say this specifically. What happened was that a few months ago, there was the Notting Hill Festival. Now, the Notting Hill Festival, the carnival passed right outside my window. And because of it, I did a video to show that I couldn't do a video. Right? It was the name. No Video Today was the name of the video I posted. And just showed that the carnival was happening right outside my window of the studio, this studio where I am now. And that was the reason that I was not going to be able to do any video that day. Now, some people privately told me, oh, you shouldn't have shown that video because people will be able to figure out where you live, right? And they were really referencing the idea of Antifa, okay? And I decided to post a video where I put out my actual address, my studio address, and saying, look, you know, you cannot be afraid of, you know, being afraid of where you're going to be. You can't be physically afraid because other people would be committing a crime against you. And living a life of fear is just not the way you should be. But I never doxed my name. I only referenced my studio's address because this is a studio. This isn't where I live. Okay, I live elsewhere. This is a studio where I do my videos, where I do my writing. I do a few other things I do, you know, perfectly natural and normal and, you know, nothing to, you know. But this isn't my home. And anyway, even if I were, well, so what? I didn't put out my name. It was just where I live or where I work in my case. And there is no link between this address and my actual name. So I never doxed myself. And any claim that I ever doxed myself is completely wrong. Okay, there was never such a thing. And SARGON in the first minute referred to me by name, and he proceeded to elaborate a whole host of things, you know, just smearing me. Now, the fact that I had appeared in television under other circumstances does not mean that I had doxed myself. It was just a few years ago, I did some TV appearances about economics. And by the way, some people asked me if I got paid for those appearances, and they smear me because they appeared on RT, which is the Russian television network, English network. I appeared on those channels because I knew some people there, and I did it as a favor. I was never paid, and I thought it would be fun. You know, I'm going to be on TV. That's like, you know, pretend to be famous kind of thing. But I never took money for it. I'm not a Russian secret agent or any nonsense like that that might be inferred from the smears that SARGON seems to have made about me.
Yeah, so it's good that you specify, because there's this meme going around the internet and everyone is bringing it back to me saying Coach Red Pill doxed himself. Coach Red Pill gave an address of his corporation, of his studio, and gives some hint of where his studio was located by taking a picture. That is far from saying, okay, giving out my name is fair game and looking into false allegations in my past life is fair game. This is not self-doxing. And to interpret this, you need to make quite of a logical step. I think that people are looking for justifications for what they did at this point. And to me, just revealing the address of a corporation, first, it's a needed act in some way, because you're going to have to reveal something if you're receiving donations and Patreon donors. So you're either going to reveal the name of a corporation to whom it goes, the email of the corporation. And so to me, that's not doxing. It's a needed step in business. And Coach Red Pill did not consent to his name being revealed that way.
Exactly. And also another thing, people keep saying, V and Sargon keep saying that my name is and address are on my Patreon. That's not true. It says Coach Red Pill and the address of this studio. And the reason I put it in there is because I welcome irregular land mail from my viewers and subscribers. And in point of fact, I do have correspondence. I receive correspondence from some people. I'll show you something that I got that I've been planning for the longest time to do a video about it. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, it's a Lego.
It's a Lego of my studio, which is just cool as all get out, right?
That is so cute.
And I mean, it is so cool. Let me just show it to you again. I'm like really. Oh, and by the way, it's these are the people who did it. A guy called Magnus, who's just fantastic, and I'm going to be doing a video about this. A coach posting video, as a matter of fact. But anyway, yeah, and some really delightful and wonderful people have been kind enough to send me all kinds of little notes and what have you, and I tried to respond to them. But that was the reason I did it, to have interaction with my audience, okay? But not under my name, but rather my actual name, but rather as Coach Red Pill. Now, before moving forward, why do I call myself Coach Red Pill, and why am I adamant about keeping that name? And following that name, which a lot of people, and rightly, call cringy as all get out. And the reason is very simple. Because you see, I'm doing these videos because I have a small child who's 2 years old. Okay, actually he's going to be turning 3 pretty soon. Now, this boy, when he's 30, I'll most likely be dead, because I'm 50 now. And so I wanted to have a body of work of videos where he could see me as a relatively young man, he could see me with my marbles more or less intact, and sorry about that, and see me when I was younger, because by the time he's old enough to appreciate these videos, like I said, I'll either be some senile and pathetic old man or dead, right? And that's why I'm doing it, because that way, with Coach Red Pill, the name of it, it keeps me on track of what I'm trying to do, which is to give advice and a perspective from somebody who's older towards somebody who's younger, towards a younger guy. Now, the reason I'm putting these videos up online is because if I just did them for myself, which I did before I launched my channel, I did a bunch of videos, just for myself. And they weren't very good because I didn't have the motivation. Because with an audience, and I'm sure you yourself, JF, feel the same way, with an audience, you sort of like up your game. You sort of like sit straighter, you're more careful with your videos, you pay more attention, you do a better job of it. And that's why I launched it as a channel. But all of these videos, of course, I'm very interested in developing this body of work, because my kid is going to see them in 20, 30, 40 years from now. And that's why they're important to me, and that's why I'm doing this channel. Okay? And I lost my train of thought. But
all right,
you take it up.
So now I'm going to ask you to stop talking, and what we're going to do, you're not going to hear it, but I'm going to display to the audience part of the Sargon video, because I want people to see a sample of what was done here. So it's going to last about 1 minute, so please hold.
Is the reason why he had to get off social media for 3 years. This gained so much attention that an economic magazine wrote on this very topic here. Steve Keen fights back after his website is stolen by Gonzalo Lira. Seems a little shady.
So here, basically, I've shown to the audience the part of where Sargon is accusing you of being shady for stealing a website to Steve Keen. We've debunked these claims. And it makes no doubt for the audience, now that you've reviewed this, that it is still in Sargon's video. I'm displaying here the description of Sargon's video. There is no apology or retraction. And so right now there is content on Sargon's platform. And I just showed a 30-second sample, but Sargon essentially takes for granted the entire Kiwi Farms post. It is undeniable that this is false, that Sargon is quoting a parody magazine accusing you of an act of stealing, which you haven't committed. Mm-hmm. So at this point, we're not going to review the entire Learn to Spot a Confident Trickster's video, but at this point, just from the segment I've shown to the audience, Sargon has a moral duty to retract, in my view. That's what I'm going to express. Of course, people who defame people and who tell lies, they don't have a legal obligation to retract always, because as it turns out, you can actually lie about public persons. It depends on what your lie is, whether it will apply to a defamation case. Those are legal details that I will not get into in that case. But clearly what we have here is a accusation of stealing by Sargon, which demonstrably comes from a parody magazine and which is demonstrably false even by Steve Keen's own admission. And at this point, all I'm saying is Sargon, as a journalist, has a moral duty to retract this statement. It is false. And I encourage him to also go through the rest of this video. This is not the only lie in there. Sargon reads the entire Kiwi Farms article as truth. It is a highly irresponsible behavior to be reading allegations like this without any form of critical review, and to be in fact adding comments which seems to further the impression that this is the truth, that Coach Red Pill was found to have committed these things. Coach, what do you have to say about this video?
It was extremely upsetting. And my thinking is as follows. Hello?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My thinking is as follows. Sargon released this video on December 20th. December 20th was when I said, I put up a video, or December 19th, I forget. I posted a video that had a large chunk of recording of Sargon talking to KRAUT and T, and where it was clear that Sargon was aware that KRAUT and T was gathering doxing information, and that this recording was on or about was on December 11th. And the implication of the conversation between those two men was that Sargon was aware even before then that KRAUT was gathering information about me, doxing information designed to smear me. And so I said that Sargon knew about KRAUT and T, and that he therefore had a moral responsibility to have said something. And I said that his failure to act makes him morally culpable. Because, see, let's look at a different situation. Suppose, JF, for the sake of argument, that I have assembled the doxing information on Andy Worski, okay? And you and I have a phone conversation, and you realize because of this phone conversation that I have the doxing and smearing information of Andy Worski, and that I could potentially, tell people about, I don't know, that Andy Worski was a cannibal. I'm just making stuff up, of course. Now, it would be your moral responsibility to say to me, Coach, you have to, throw that information away, that you cannot reveal that information under any set of circumstances. It would be your moral duty, JF, to alert Andy as to what's going on, and potentially be the one to blow the whistle publicly and say, hey, Coach is gathering information on Andy Worski. This is doxing, and this is something that Coach should not be doing under any set of circumstances. This would be, I would think, JF, your moral responsibility in that situation, right?
Well, I want to comment on this because I've reviewed your Sargon new video. So I will say factually, your video was correct. Sargon knew. We have this from the audio. He knew. So to attack you based on this video is absolutely ridiculous. You've stated something that Sargon himself admits now. On the question of moral duty, did Sargon, and I don't want people to be confused there, I believe that Sargon right now, as we speak, has a moral duty to withdraw his lies on the Tinkery channel. That's one thing. But the moral duty you're talking about here is, did Sargon have a moral duty to inform the public or to inform you, for example, or the potential targets of the doxing activities of KRAUT? Did he have a moral duty to inform any of these people? I do not follow you on that. However, I will say it's a moral preference of yours, and it was legitimate of you to make a video saying, I believe, as Coach Red Pill, I believe that Sargon should have informed people, but I don't as JF.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Suppose I have a gun, and I blabber to you and I say, oh, JF, you know, tomorrow I'm going to go and shoot up, you know, Buckingham Palace or something. Legally, you'd be obliged to go and tell the police that there's this crazy man who has a gun who's threatening to go and shoot up Buckingham Palace.
It's a very good argument. However, because you cannot be sure that someone who is performing act of information digging is necessarily going to use it for defamation purposes, that's where I don't attribute.
You yourself said that there is no other reason to gather personal information on a YouTuber other than to smear them and use that information to intimidate them. You yourself said that.
I know, but you could have a private use of that information. For example,
such as?
Well, and I actually designed this this fictive example in response to Braving Rune in private, who was asking me what's my position about doxing. So suppose I'm a journalist, and suppose that Coach Red Pill has been. This is a fictive example that I actually had to generate it in my mind to realize that it was not ultimately a moral responsibility. Imagine that Coach Red Pill is going around saying that homosexuality is wrong. And he's a known anti-homosexual speaker. He's a preacher. There's 1 million people listening to his stuff, and they're like, yeah, Coach Red Pill is the real man. Gays are wrong. And imagine that I needed to do some research on your private life to eventually find out, and first I would do research on your name, then I would get your name, then I would get your ancient stories, but I would keep all of it private. But then I would use this information to dig the fact that in the past you've been sucking dicks for 5 years.
I haven't. Say that I haven't, or else people are going to start.
You haven't. You haven't. But let's say I was to discover this. Yeah. It would be a legitimate purpose for public discourse to say, hey, Coach Red Pill is contradicting himself because he brings stuff about homosexuality, and in fact he claimed that he is not gay, but I have evidence that he was gay in the past. This is a legitimate use of doxing information where I wouldn't reveal your name. I wouldn't smear you. I would say this statement, which Coach Red Pill is now doing today, was false. So maybe I would requalify my earlier statement and say there can be legitimate uses to information. They are just very rare, and in this case it's clear that it wasn't the case. It's clear that KRAUT intended to smear you. He admitted it. Yeah. But there are potential journalistic use of information that can make sense to me. And when I judge this case, I'm not just trying to find who's guilty in that case. I'm trying to lead to a platform for the future of YouTube. What do we criticize? What do we not criticize? That's why I cannot follow you on this second moral duty.
Well, because this is my thing. Sargon recognized from the very conversation, the recorded conversation that you and I both listened to, Sargon realized that the only reason to gather this information was to smear people. He did not explicitly admit it, but it was tacitly understood that the only reason to dig up dirt, as he referred to it, was to throw that dirt at somebody. Because I understand your objection. You're saying that the hypocrisy argument, if somebody's advocating A, but it turns out that in their private life or in their previous life, they were actually doing B, you know, that hypocrisy should be exposed. And I can understand that to an extent, okay? But I can understand it, I mean, on a moral plane. But in this particular case, it was evident from the conversation that Sargon knew that, number one, KRAUT was digging up dirt on me and other people. And number two, KRAUT, Sargon tacitly understood that KRAUT had every intention of using it to smear people, because he said that it was an SJW tactic and that it was morally wrong. So
Exactly.
he knew the intent that KRAUT had in gathering that information. Just as in the example I said, if you see John Smith walking around with a gun and you know for a fact that he intends to shoot somebody because he's saying that, or because of other clues that lead you to conclude that he has every intention of shooting somebody or some group of people, it would be your moral duty to put a stop to him, either by calling the police or stopping him yourself or doing whatever is necessary to call attention to the danger that is emerging from this person.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I would stand by the statement. Sargon did something morally reprehensible in staying silent by his own moral standard, as he expressed in that conversation. But I don't go as far as saying Sargon had a moral duty, in my view, because I know that there are cases where you could be informed of such activities and you may not be convinced that the person will go on with it in a way that is malicious. And so for this, I don't attribute the moral responsibility, but you're absolutely correct. Sargon is wrong by his moral statement that he stated himself.
Right. And so basically, look, this is how I look at this whole situation. And thank you for agreeing with my point of view of recognizing that Sargon knew what was going on, number one, and he knew that the ill intent of the situation, and number three, that by his own moral standards, he behaved reprehensibly. And the fourth issue that he did is he smeared me with this very information that KRAUT had assembled, right, that he knew was one-sided, that he knew was just dirt. He used it. But the question you have to ask is why? Why? Like I said at the very beginning of this conversation, why is it that Sargon did this piece? And I have some suppositions, some inferences, and I will share them with you, and you tell me whether you agree with them or not. Okay. Number one, you have to keep in mind that that very day, or the day before, I forget when, I put up a video called Sargon Knew, and it was very well received, and it got a lot of views when it came out. And it was basically playing the recording and me saying that he had the moral responsibility as I saw it. But the video that you agree is factually accurate in every point, and that we could disagree slightly on the moral responsibility, but we've agreed that based on the recordings that we heard of Sargon, Sargon acted in a way that was reprehensible insofar as smearing me, right?
Yeah.
So he released his doxing and smearing video right after that video that I put out came out. Now, why? And my thinking is he wanted to accomplish several things at the same time. Number one, he wanted to deflect and change the conversation. And so, to my way of thinking, what he decided to do was that show me in the worst light possible to distract people from his responsibility for the KRAUT server and what KRAUT had intended to do. Because if you agree that I was right factually, and you agree that by his own lights he was behaving inconsistently and reprehensibly, well, Sargon realized that that would have to be distracted from, because if people started like digging deeper, they would realize, or they would come to the agreement with me, that Sargon had a moral responsibility. So by smearing me, he distracts people. Number two, he disqualifies me. This is a Saul Alinsky tactic. Saul Alinsky, which Sargon is a big fan of, always says that it's not enough to defeat your opponent. You have to smear them and disqualify them so nothing that they ever say afterwards will ever be taken seriously. And you have to agree with me that Sargon did a masterful job of smearing me in that 40-minute video. Because we have to remember, Sargon had never done a dox and smear video, let alone one that lasted 40 minutes. Not once, not even to the worst SJW that he ever had to deal with. This is a first for him. So why would he do such a thing if it's not to protect his own position? Because he felt threatened. Because he realized that people would agree with me and find him morally responsible. So number one, distraction. Number two, smearing me so that nobody pays attention to anything I say, and anything I say is completely disqualified. And the third reason I believe that he did this is actually the worst of the reasons. See, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, if I have doxing information about you, that can, well, actually you said it, but I agreed with you completely. I can intimidate you. If I have doxing information or smearing information and I just wave it around subtly, I can intimidate you into silence. Now, by Sargon doxing and smearing me and just hitting me as hard as he possibly could, Sargon gave notice to the rest of the YouTube community. And the notice was very simple. Don't cross me, or what happened to Coach Red Pill might happen to you. They were the actions of a bully. They were the actions of somebody afraid for his position, realizing that he did have moral responsibility for what KRAUT had been doing, and that if it came out and people started really noticing it, they'd start looking at Sargon with very different eyes. And so he decided that he would use an example, me, destroying my channel, as an example to everybody else, every other major YouTuber, because a lot of people on 4chan have wondered, how come nobody is talking about the fact that Sargon doxed and smeared a trivial YouTuber? Because I'm trivial. I mean, I've got like 13,000 subscribers, 13,800 subscribers or something. Okay, in the scheme of things, it's microscopic. It's 1/50th or less of Sargon's audience. Actually, if you combine, the Thinkery and his regular Sargon and Bakad subscriber base, it's even less. I'm nothing. I'm a flea. Why go after somebody who is a flea if it's not to set an example so that other YouTubers, bigger YouTubers who are respected, they'll be on notice. And the notice is very simple. Cross Sargon and you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get a hit piece on you. And there was a conversation recently between Sargon and Mr. Medicare. And in that conversation, at the very end of it, it was an hour-long conversation about this whole liberalist party thing that Sargon is doing, right? And at the very end of that conversation, Jim, Mr. Medicare, brought up the issue of doxing. And they had a little conversation there. I viewed it, quite frankly, and you can disagree with me, but I viewed that interaction as basically Sargon giving notice that if the information is out there, it's not doxing. And the problem is that, see, everybody's information is out there. Everybody, especially the YouTubers who are trying to remain behind a pseudonym, everybody's name is out there in some way or another. And I know that it's probably happened to you because it's happened to me that people in comment section, just asshole people will like say, oh, this guy's real name is XXX, right? And, you pick up and find out who these other YouTubers are, their real names, not because you're looking for it, but because some jerk decides to put it in your comment section and you see the name and you can't unsee it. And so all of a sudden you have this information in your head. Like I said earlier, I have the names of a bunch of big YouTubers, people I like, I'm indifferent to, and I deeply dislike. I would never mention their names or ever try to dig up anything about it because I'm just not interested. But the thing is, see, all of us who are larger YouTubers or well-known YouTubers or who have a lot of people who follow our work, well, we get this information not because we go looking for it, because people just leave it there, for whatever reason. They want to curry favor or this or that or the other, or they want to look so cool or something like that. It doesn't matter why. We get this information, and it's our moral responsibility not to use it. I certainly do not. But going back to the Sargon issue, he has been around for a while. He knows everybody's real names. He's big enough, and the comment section is big enough, that he is probably at some point or other has everybody's name. So potentially, by doing what he did to me, he's putting everybody on notice and saying, if you ever cross me and say something I don't like, I'm going to dox you. I'm going to smear you. I'm going to do a hit piece on you like I did to Coach Red Pill. That is what Sargon was saying.
So I'm going to list a few things with which I agree, and on some other things it will be like my previous answer, which is it is speculation. It is not groundless speculation. It is hypothetical. These are valid hypotheses. So first, it was highly uncharacteristic of Sargon to do that. We've never seen anything like that. Anything that closely resembles this. a 40 minutes video, much of which was smearing, much of which was reviewing allegations very uncritically. I've never seen that before from Sargon. The second thing is, it is true that he has now been informed, in case he didn't know, he has now been informed by Mr. Mitaker that the information he used in that video comes directly from the KRAUT efforts of doxing CRP.
Which I suspect he knew, by the way, but we'll just leave it at that.
So we don't know if he knew, but at least now he knows. So now the information is still out there. His video is still up. It hasn't been updated. It hasn't been retracted. Yet now he understands that he used the work product of an enterprise that he called himself morally wrong.
Yes.
And so if I was to go on the street and I don't know, maybe I would find $10,000, but then I would be told that the $10,000 I found was stolen by someone, and that murders have occurred in the process, and that drugs were sold, and that ultimately the reason I have this $10,000 in my hand is that the multiple crimes were committed, and that ultimately the $10,000 belongs to someone else. I would have a moral duty then, at least as I'm informed, to go back and give back the $10,000 to who it belongs. Here I see the same thing. Even if you don't want to attribute a moral duty to Sargon in the past, because we cannot prove that he knew that his Kiwi farm post that he shows on the video came from KRAUT, now he knows. Now he knows that there are records of him saying, KRAUT, what you're doing is morally wrong, and he now knows that he's been using the work product of KRAUT. Now, these are the parts I agree with. On the question of what was the intent of Sargon in publishing that video, I think it's a reasonable hypothesis to say, well, maybe he wanted to establish himself as a kind of potentially dangerous person to attack. But I don't think there's evidence for it either. I think that he may just have been interested in really beating you to the ground. He may just have been interested in winning this fight with you. But he took the wrong fight, because he fought against a video of yours which was merely a factual statement, which he admits, and then a moral duty that you attribute. You said, I think that you should have done A, B, C. It's not worth to smear a minor YouTuber who tells you should have done ABC. You can respond, I don't think I should have done ABC, but there's no reason why he would have to smear you. I think he was probably emotional on this. Maybe he wanted to demonstrate a kind of rudeness to others, but I don't have evidence for it, so I cannot adhere to this as a demonstrated fact. All right. So now
I disagree. I think that, think. I'm a tiny YouTuber, really small. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, think of it. Imagine anybody else. Okay, you know a bunch of YouTubers who are roughly my size. Okay, why would Sargon do a hit piece on any of them? Why? I mean, okay, so they say the same video that I did, right? But divorced from the context. Suppose they did it like just yesterday when the whole KRAUT thing has died down. Why would he do some kind of a hit piece on me like that? It just doesn't make any sense unless there was a different motivation for Sargon, a very important motivation. Sargon is all about power politics. He talks about it all the time. He thinks that just reading a bunch of books is enough to understand power politics, which is absurd, because, of course, he doesn't realize that power politics is just nihilism if it's divorced from morality. And the way he plays it, it is divorced from morality. He thinks that it's just enough to win. To win, yeah, but it has to be in the service of a moral purpose. Now, he is all about power politics. He's all about trying to implement Saul Alinsky's dictum of how to win the argument. I mean, he says so himself that the people who are anti-SJW have to copy SJW tactics in order to win, which I don't agree with, but that's his opinion. And that's what he did. He tried to smear me in order to disqualify me. If he disagreed with my points, as you yourself said, why didn't he say, Coach Red Pill said ABC, I disagree with ABC because of these 3 reasons? And that would have been that. Why the need to smear? Because when you smear somebody, what you're really doing is trying to disqualify them. What you're really doing is trying to get everybody to say, hey, you know, that guy over there, he's just a scum. So anything he says, you just dismiss it. If you're trying to disqualify somebody that blatantly, could it be that that person is saying something that's true? Could it be that you realize the truth of what that guy is saying? Because after all, that's what SJWs do all the time. They keep smearing people because they can't counter the facts. They can't counter the argument. So they're reduced to trying to smearing people, carrying out character assassinations on them because they can't defeat them. Sargon of Akkad knew that what I was saying was true, and I contend that he deliberately tried to character assassinate me, knowing that that information on Kiwi Farms was false or grossly skewed, precisely because he knew I was right and that there was no way for him to counter the argument. And it served his further purpose of making sure that everybody knew that he would fuck them over if they crossed him. I mean, it's fair for you to disagree with this point of view, but that's what I think. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I mean, I don't even disagree. It's that I have a categorization in my head, which is possible hypothesis and demonstrated fact. And I have to keep this threshold, which can be frustrating for someone who makes interpretations like you. I certainly stand for your liberty to make these hypotheses. These are reasonable hypotheses, and they are not demonstrated false by any fact right now.
Right.
But
so
as an investigator...
At this point in time, it's a valid inference. Whether it's the only possible inference, well, that's to be seen.
Yeah, because as an investigator, the reason I progress so well in these stories and the reason no one has ever catched me making any major error is that I have this threshold for knowledge, and as I advance within the unknown, I need some facts, I need some very solid demonstration before I state a fact, and demonstrations of intent are almost always impossible unless you have an acknowledgement by the person. Now, I will note another fact which may not open to an alternative hypothesis, but which may cultivate our minds to different ideas of what may be happening here. I feel that when KRAUT disappeared from the internet, essentially all of his work was continued. It's amazing to see how after he went away from the internet, I'm just gonna wait because there's noise here. I'm gonna let the phone ring.
I assume that you're going to cut out this part of it, right?
Yeah, I'll cut it out. I'll go close my door. All right, so I'm going to repeat that part. So one other thing I would like us to think about, and it may not open to necessarily an alternative hypothesis to what you're proposing, but it certainly will open our mind to different ways we can interpret what happened there. One thing I've noted is after the disappearance of KRAUT from the internet, and we tend to think that KRAUT was the mastermind of all this operation of doxing and smearing that was occurring. We tend to think this because he took the blame and he left the internet in shame. But I will note that after he disappeared from the internet, all of his work was continued in some way.
Yes.
You were smeared by Sargon after KRAUT had left the internet. I was smeared by Jeff Holiday and by others, including Destiny.
Yes.
I think that we're missing a piece of the puzzle here. We're missing what kind of coordination is happening between these people so that they could divide the work in such an efficient manner.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Now, you, as you yourself said, are a man of facts, and you have no problem entertaining hypotheses, but you have a bright shining line between a bright line between what is a fact and what is a hypothesis. Now, I tend to be somebody who is, I tend to draw inferences, sometimes too quickly, but I tend to draw inferences, and those inferences often as not tend to be accurate, because not because I'm that smart. I've just been around longer and I've seen more. And so my inference is that KRAUT was fundamentally correct in that recording when he said that he hung up the phone with Sargon and said, "My God, Sargon is trying to throw me under the bus." Yeah, he got thrown under the bus, and by implication of what KRAUT said, Sargon was as morally implicated in what was going on as KRAUT himself. I honestly believe that at the end of the day, Sargon was behind this whole thing. Sargon was behind this push to go after the alt-right. Sargon sort of like egged along the notion of gathering, doxing, and smearing information on different people. And of course, people are going to say that I'm crazy, I'm paranoid, I'm this, that, the other. But isn't it weird that every time I float one of these really crazy paranoid ideas that I have, you know, the ideas that come from the voices in my head, later they turn out to be true? Why is that? Do I get lucky? You know, JF, do you think I'm just a really lucky guy that I say these crazy things? I'm just blabbering and just drooling and just saying, you know, whatever the voices in my head say, and it's just dumb luck that I keep hitting the mark, that I keep saying things that turn out to be factually true in the end.
Well,
do you think I'm just lucky?
You have one of the most impressive record in terms of me finding you completely beside the track or completely making baseless assumption, and then me realizing that you were speaking with much more knowledge than I believed, and that eventually you are demonstrated right. I think it happened 3 times in my life, and I've never revealed to you that I was doubting your statement. But I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, that's baseless for now. And you turned out to be right in these 3 instances. And so you are making solid statements usually. The possibility that Sargon may be a mastermind in all of this, is certainly a mastermind in part of this. Sargon is one of the earliest people on YouTube who has talked about fighting against the alt-right. And so to what extent was he controlling KRAUT? Maybe not to a great extent, maybe to a great extent. Ultimately, the details don't really matter about whether he was coaching him sentence by sentence or whether he was just guiding him through IDs. The reality is that Sargon was interested in leading a fight against the alt-right, and many of his followers have turned to these dirty tactics. And the fact that these dirty tactics have continued after the abandonment of KRAUT, and apparently without KRAUT's involvement, suggests that there are mechanisms in the skeptics community to ensure the dirt that KRAUT may have participated to would be exposed and would be used in the way KRAUT and others intended to in the first place. So it's a stunning hypothesis and a worrying one in my view, to believe that Sargon may have been a central agent pursuing the dirty deeds of KRAUT.
Yeah, I honestly believe that. And I think that, look, I don't have to worry about it too much because it'll eventually come out. See? Because one of the things about conspiracies, because this was a conspiracy, obviously, one of the things about conspiracy is that people eventually talk. Nobody can keep a secret. See? If 2 people know a secret, it's not a secret anymore, because one of them is going to talk at some point or another. One of them is going to reveal the truth, because that's how people are. Okay. Eventually, you know, it's going to break. We're going to find out more information. We're going to find out that key bit of information that I pointed to you, where I mentioned those 4 YouTubers, KRAUT, Some Black Guy, Dave Cullen, and Jeff Holiday, who were all supposed to do anti-alt-right videos. Who set them on that task? Was it a mutual decision, or did somebody say, go in that direction, boys? Doesn't it make sense that those 4 individuals who owed huge chunks of their audience, of their subscriber base, to Sargon, doesn't it make sense that they would be very deferential towards him, very afraid of him, and willing to do his bidding if he asked politely?
Well, Coach, this was an amazing talk, and you are leaving us with a stunning hypothesis on which I cannot find anything that would prove it wrong. And there are worrying facts that are legitimately giving this hypothesis some weight. The 4 persons you mentioned were indeed mentioned by KRAUT. It was supposed to be a collective work against the alt-right, and there aren't many people on this planet who could have done any sort of coordination between these 4 other than Sargon. So Coach, thanks for being on. I hope people
before we go, I want to say that I want to thank you very much, JF. And the reason I was so eager to be on your channel is because I know you well enough that you're never going to pull your punches, and you're never going to say or advocate something that is not true. And like in this conversation, I think that everybody who's heard you can attest. You are always careful to be on the right side of the line between hypothesis and fact. And for that, I thank you, because in my own case, the smearing that I suffered and the doxing, but the smearing most especially, which bothers me the most, you've been kind enough to look at the facts even-handedly, and you have been strong enough and tough enough as a man to say, this is true and this is false. And that judgment made with complete equanimity and just letting the chips fall where they may is something that I value tremendously, because in my own case, I was quite certain that the truth would be on my side. But the fact that you are willing to give me the opportunity to show that truth, that truth would come out, is something invaluable, and I thank you for it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye. All right, so I've stopped the recording, and we are still live. But the final video is recorded. So how did people of the chat enjoy? I mean, Coach, you have the choice if you want to chill here for a few minutes or if you want to leave.
Sure. No. I have a video that I have to edit, but no, just checking the time. Yeah, it would be delightful. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and you know, this whole thing is just so pathetic, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
You know, this little, you know, the evil deeds and, you know, little doxing and smearing people and all of this machinations, instead of just moving forward honestly and truthfully, because it's easier. It's frankly a drag to be doing all this shit. I'll tell you honestly, the thing that, and I don't have a problem if your audience hears this, the thing that bothers me the most, the thing that I really feel bad about, is that a lot of YouTubers have, you know, distanced themselves from me because they feel that they'll be in trouble, that they could get in trouble, and that that they could be perceived as, you know, oh, he's friendly with Coach, so, you know, Sargon might get mad. And that's when I noticed and realized that what Sargon had done, I consider, and you can disagree, and that's perfectly fine, but I feel that part of the reason he did this was to just make it clear to everybody that he would go after anybody who crossed him, and that I was persona non grata. And it's upsetting to be persona non grata, and for other YouTubers with whom I developed relationships, those relationships are all ruined, or they're all gone. And it's very painful, but, you know, that's life, you know, I mean, it just sucks. But, you know,
experienced the same thing. It's very worrying to see the strength of the social phenomena in these communities, in our community, and the coordination of mimetic lying. It's absolutely disgusting, and you can see the true nature of human beings when you look at these events. People are so dirty, and there's only a few dirty people, but then they convince other that, oh, maybe I shouldn't interact with Coach Red Pill, or it's not that I think that these allegations are true, but I think I may avoid Coach Red Pill. And I've had the same thing. I've had a very good YouTuber with whom I had very good collaboration. Actually, I had 3 YouTubers who wrote to me, and they were like following the false allegations about my past life, being that I would have raped a 11-year-old woman.
Very disgusting allegations.
And they came to me, and some of them were asking for explanations, and some of them were like, I'm not sure I can work with you anymore. It's like, dude, you're gonna believe a bunch of people on a forum?
Yeah.
Don't you expect that every YouTuber who has any sort of political ID will eventually get smeared on a forum? Of course they will. So we have to stand higher than this as YouTuber. And that's what I'm trying to do when by going through your story in details.